13 machine guns could not make the B-17 feel safe. The famous Flying Fortress was a four-engine Allied heavy bomber of the Second World War, built for high-altitude strategic bombing and long-distance bomb loads. On paper, it was a marvel. Big, heavily armed, and able to limp home after punishment that would tear lesser aircraft apart. Inside, though, a mission could feel like a trip into hell, with only a chance of coming back. This story is about why those flights were so dangerous, why the machine was so miserable to crew, and why the young men who climbed aboard it needed a kind of courage that often cost them dearly. For its time, the B-17 was huge, and its capabilities were far beyond many aircraft around it. None of that made life inside any gentler. Some crew stations were frightening before a German fighter ever appeared. The bomber was meant to cruise at about 5,500 meters, yet it was not pressurized. Up there, the men had to live behind oxygen masks. The cold could fall to minus 60 degrees Celsius, so they wore electrically heated flying suits just to function. If a man was wounded, blood could freeze as it left the wound, sometimes slowing the bleeding. But if a suit failed or was torn by damage, the danger changed fast. Oxygen starvation, frostbite, and a body that could no longer obey. Veterans remembered that when oxygen stopped reaching a mask, a crewman might simply drift off, and without help, he could be dead within 5 minutes. Bare skin was another enemy. Touch metal without gloves, and the skin could come away with it. A gunner clearing a jam in freezing air could lose a finger, and many men carried frostbite home. The B-17 was stable enough to fly in tight formations, and that became its shield. Packed together, the bombers overlapped their fields of fire and built a moving box of machine guns against fighters. But crews said one of the hardest parts came before the target, forming up. Dozens of bombers lifted off about 30 seconds apart, one rolling as another was already starting behind it. Even training for formation flying was deadly. As many as 2,800 airmen were lost in accidents before they ever faced the enemy. Once over hostile territory, the main killer was German anti-aircraft fire, though several crew positions were terrifying on their own. German air defenses were efficient, and their guns and fighter pilots sent many B-17s down. The most famous weapon was the German 88mm Flak cannon, feared for accuracy and destructive power, and used effectively even against tanks. Its shells could reach roughly 9,100 meters, well inside the bomber stream's working altitude. That meant the Flying Fortress could be hit long before the bombs were released. Those guns clustered around the places bombers were sent to destroy, major factories and vital cities. Flak shells were set to burst at a chosen height, throwing fragments across a wide area. A direct hit could rip a B-17 apart. Even a near miss was dangerous, because the aircraft was built largely from aluminum. Shrapnel could punch through the fuselage, wings, or control surfaces, and it could kill crewmen in an instant. The worst part was the waiting. Crews watched black bursts appear ahead, never knowing whether the next cloud held their shell. They saw nearby bombers burning, falling, or exploding if fuel or bombs were struck. Sometimes no parachutes opened. Then came the thought every man tried to push away. Maybe the next one is ours. And Flak was not the only threat. German fighters such as the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf Fv-190 were guided by radar warnings and sent up to meet the bomber formations. They often attacked in coordinated waves, head-on passes aimed at cockpits and engines. Rear and side attacks looked for blind spots. Their weapons included 20 or 30mm cannon, along with 7.92 or 13mm machine guns, and those hits could maul a B-17 badly. At first, Allied planners believed 13 machine guns gave the bomber enough protection to fly without escort. That belief did not survive experience. Early escort fighters lacked the range to stay with the bombers all the way. Later, long-range fighters such as the P-51 Mustang cut losses sharply. Now put 10 men inside that machine. The cockpit was narrow, the ceiling low, and moving through the bomber could mean crawling. The crew wore bulky heated suits, oxygen masks, flak vests, helmets and parachute harnesses, because if the order came, there might be no time to dress for survival. Their average age was under 25. Statistically, their mortality rate was about 20%, described as 50 times higher than European infantry and 10 times higher than Pacific infantry. The tail gunner, guarding the rear, sat on what was basically a cut-down bicycle seat, half kneeling in a cramped compartment for hours. Yet crews often spoke of the waist gunner position as the worst place of all. In a B-17, that was saying something. Waist gunners worked twin 50-caliber machine guns in the side windows of the aircraft, packed into a tight space with almost no comfort. Unlike other crewmen, they had no real seat. They stood or knelt, leaning into the guns to aim and fire. The windows were open for a wider field of fire, so the cold came straight in. Protection from enemy bullets was minimal, almost nothing. If the bomber collided with another aircraft or came down with damaged landing gear, waist gunners could be crushed. Above them, the top turret gunner also handled twin 50-caliber guns. His turret sat just behind the cockpit and gave a 360-degree view, which also made him easy to see and easy to target. The ball turret gunner faced his own ordeal inside another twin gun turret. In the ball turret beneath the aircraft, the gunner fought the war almost alone. The space was so tight that his parachute stayed up in the fuselage because there was no room inside the turret. To get out, the turret had to be rotated until its door lined up with the crew compartment, and that depended on hydraulics. If those hydraulics were shot away, escape could vanish in seconds. There were only two positions where the ball turret gunner could climb out. Anywhere else, he was locked in. Men trapped that way could ride a dying aircraft all the way down or burn before anyone could reach them. And if the landing gear failed, staying in the turret could be just as final. The aircraft could come down on top of him and crush him against the runway. That kind of ending did happen. The rest of the Flying Fortress crew had their own jobs: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, radio operator, and the other gunners, all trying to keep one damaged bomber alive. After a hit, if the aircraft still answered the controls, the crew checked the damage fast. The best hope was to hold altitude, turn back toward base, or at least reach friendly lines and crash land there. Many never made it. Some went into the sea, others somehow limped home with only 2 engines still working out of 4, far below what the aircraft was meant to endure. If the damage was beyond saving, the pilot gave the bailout signal. Men grabbed parachutes, found the nearest exit, and helped whoever was still moving. Over enemy territory, survival often meant capture. In the Pacific, captured airmen could face brutal captivity, and many did not come home. The sea was hardly a safer exit. Unless a downed crew was found quickly, cold, wounds, or simple distance could finish what the fighters had started. Air-sea rescue missions were flown, but they could not reach everyone in time. Some bombers took direct hits that touched off fuel or bombs. Others were torn up so badly that they dropped too fast for anyone to get out. For crews like these, courage was not a slogan. It was the price of climbing into the aircraft at all. Their missions deserve a closer look.